Veltar sat in the cold metal chair, his forearms folded across his chest. The bright lights of the tribunal room hurt his large black eyes. 3 years had passed since the Proxima campaign, but the memories still burned in his mind like acid. "Tell us what happened," said the tribunal leader, a tall blue alien with tentacles for hair. "Tell us about the humans." Veltar's throat clicked as he swallowed. Where could he begin? How could he explain the nightmare that was humanity at war? "We thought they were weak," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were so wrong." The memory came flooding back. 3 years ago, the great Kethmori fleet had gathered at the edge of the Proxima system. 200 warships, each one bigger than a city. Commander Corthan stood on the bridge of the flagship, his massive frame covered in battle scars from 17 conquered worlds. "Look at them," Corthan had laughed, pointing at the view screen. 3 small human ships floated in space, barely the size of Kethmori fighters. "These soft mammals think they can stop us?" Veltar had been a scout then, young and eager for his first real battle. He watched the human ships through his scope, studying their design. They looked so fragile, like toys made of thin metal. The Kethmori ships were built like mountains of steel and plasma. How could these tiny vessels pose any threat? "Sir," reported the communications officer, "the humans are sending surrender signals." The bridge crew laughed. Even Veltar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. This would be easier than they thought. The humans were giving up before the fight even started. "Put them on screen," Corthan ordered. A human face appeared on the view screen. The creature was small and pale, with tiny eyes and no visible claws. It spoke in a weak voice. "This is Captain Li Jinwu of the Human Defense Fleet. We cannot match your numbers. We request terms for surrender." More laughter filled the bridge. Veltar watched the human captain closely. Something felt wrong, but he could not say what. The human's eyes were too calm for someone about to surrender. "Very well," Corthan replied. "Prepare your colonies for occupation. Resistance will be met with death." "Understood," said Captain Li Jinwu. "We are evacuating our civilians now. Please allow our refugee ship safe passage." Corthan waved a dismissive hand. "Of course. We are warriors, not butchers of the weak." Over the next few hours, dozens of human refugee ships fled from the colonies. They were old, slow vessels packed with families and children. The Kethmori fleet let them pass without interference. It was the honorable thing to do. But Veltar noticed something strange. As each refugee ship passed by, it sent out communication signals. The humans claimed they were distress calls, cries for help from the fleeing civilians. But Veltar's job was to watch and listen. The signals seemed too organized, too precise. "Sir," Veltar reported to his squad leader, "the refugee ships are transmitting data." "Of course they are," his leader replied. "They are calling for help. Let them cry to their gods. It will not save them." But Veltar kept watching. The refugee ships spread out in all directions, each one broadcasting constantly. It looked random, but patterns began to emerge. The ships were positioning themselves around the Kethmori fleet, creating a wide circle. Then the trap was sprung. The 3 small human ships that had surrendered suddenly exploded into action. But they were not trying to fight. Instead, they fired strange devices that stuck to nearby Kethmori ships. The devices looked harmless, like small metal boxes. "What are those?" Corthan demanded. "Scanning now, sir," replied the science officer. "They appeared to be communication relays?" That was when Veltar understood. The refugee ships had been gathering information about every Kethmori ship in the fleet. The small devices were sending that information somewhere else. The humans had not surrendered at all. They had been studying their enemy. Warning sirens suddenly filled the bridge. New contacts appeared on the sensor screen. Human ships were jumping into the system from 3 different directions. Not the small, weak vessels they had seen before, but real warships. And they knew exactly where every Kethmori ship was located. "Impossible," breathed Corthan. "Where did they come from?" Veltar watched in growing horror as the human fleet moved with perfect precision. They did not charge forward like honorable warriors. Instead, they attacked weak points in the Kethmori formation, hitting ships that were isolated or damaged. It was like watching a pack of predators hunt a herd. "All ships form defensive positions," Corthan commanded, but it was too late. The humans had already divided the Kethmori fleet into smaller groups. The battle that followed was unlike anything Veltar had ever seen. The humans did not fight with honor or glory. They fought like a disease, spreading through the fleet and weakening it from within. When Kethmori ships tried to help each other, the humans would retreat, leading them into traps set by other human vessels. They are not fighting us, Veltar whispered to himself. They are dissecting us. The worst part came when Captain Li Jinwu's ship approached the flagship. Veltar expected a glorious duel between commanders, ship against ship. Instead, the human vessel rammed itself into the Kethmori flagship's docking bay. They have committed suicide, laughed Corthan. These humans have no honor. But the human ship had not exploded. Instead, armed figures in strange armor poured out of it. They moved through the flagship's corridors like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in the shadows. Veltar watched the security cameras in amazement. The humans seemed to know exactly where to go, as if they had studied the ship's design for years. How do they know our ship layout? Asked the security chief. The refugee ships, Veltar said suddenly. They were not just gathering positions. They were scanning our technology, our ship designs, everything. The human boarding team moved with surgical precision. They did not try to kill everyone they met. Instead, they targeted specific systems: communications, weapons control, life support. They were not raiders. They were surgeons cutting out the fleet's ability to function. Within hours, the flagship was crippled. Other Kethmori ships found themselves unable to coordinate their attacks. Some lost power, others lost their weapons. A few simply went dark, their crews trapped inside their own vessels. Captain Li Jinwu appeared on the bridge, surrounded by his soldiers. He was smaller than any Kethmori warrior, but Veltar felt a chill run down his spine when he looked into the human's eyes. They were not the eyes of a savage or a monster. They were the eyes of a scientist studying an interesting specimen. "Commander Corthan," said the human captain, "I offer you the same terms you offered my people. Surrender, and your crews will be treated with honor." Corthan drew his plasma sword, roaring a battle cry. But before he could take a step, one of the human soldiers fired a small device. Corthan collapsed, his massive body twitching on the floor. "Stunner," explained Captain Li Jinwu to Veltar, as if they were having a casual conversation. "Non-lethal. We prefer to capture rather than kill. Dead enemies teach us nothing." That was when Veltar truly understood what they were facing. The humans had not come to conquer or destroy. They had come to learn. Every battle, every encounter was a lesson for them. They studied their enemies like scientists study lab animals. "You will be taken to the planet's surface," Captain Li Jinwu continued. "The ground forces will decide what happens next." As Veltar was led away with the other survivors, he heard the human captain speaking into his communication device. Phase 1 complete. All intelligence objectives achieved. Recommend proceeding to Phase 2, Veltar shivered. Phase 2? This had only been the beginning. The transport ships carried the surviving Kethmori forces down to the planet's surface. Veltar pressed his face against the small window, watching the world below. Proxima 3 was a mixed planet with forests, deserts, mountains, and lakes, perfect for establishing a strong ground position. "At least we can fight properly here," growled Squad Leader Brixton. "Ship-to-ship combat is not our way. On the ground, we are unstoppable." Veltar wanted to share his leader's confidence, but something cold sat in his stomach. The humans had been too smart in space. Would they suddenly become stupid on land? The Kethmori forces landed in a wide valley surrounded by hills. It was a good defensive position with clear sightlines in all directions. Commander Zekvar, who had taken charge after Corthan's capture, immediately ordered the construction of fortified camps. "Build strong walls," he commanded. "Set up weapon platforms. The humans will come to us and we will crush them in honorable battle." For 3 days the Kethmori worked. They built walls of metal and stone. They placed heavy weapons at every corner. They created a fortress that could withstand any assault. Veltar felt better watching the strong defenses rise around them. On the 4th day, the waiting began. The humans did not attack. They did not even show themselves. The Kethmori soldiers stood at their posts, weapons ready, but no enemy came. Hours turned into days. Days turned into weeks. "Where are they?" asked Zilway, Veltar's closest friend. "Are they afraid to face us?" Veltar did not think the humans were afraid. He remembered Captain Li Jinwu's calm eyes. Those were not the eyes of a coward. "Sir," reported a perimeter guard, "Patrol 7 has not returned." Commander Zekvar frowned. "Send out a search team." The search team found nothing. No bodies, no signs of battle, No trace of where Patrol 7 had gone. It was as if 6 Kethmori warriors had simply vanished from existence. 2 days later, Patrol 12 disappeared. Then Patrol 3. Then 2 more patrols in the same night. "They are picking us off one by one," whispered a young soldier, "like hunters taking weak animals from a herd." "Nonsense," barked Commander Zekvar. "We are Kethmori warriors. We do not fall to cowardly ambushes." But Veltar noticed how the commander's voice shook slightly when he said it. The first body they found told a different story. Scout leader Morkex was discovered 3 kilometers from the camp, tied to a tree. He was alive but barely conscious. Strange marks covered his body, not cuts or burns but precise puncture wounds. "What happened?" Veltar asked when Morkex could finally speak. "The mountains," Morkex whispered. "They came from the mountains. But they were not there when we looked. They were invisible until they struck. How many of them? I don't know. Maybe 5, maybe 50. They moved like shadows." Veltar studied the wounds on Morkex's body. They were too precise to be random torture. Each mark was in a specific place. Nerve centers, pressure points, areas that would cause maximum pain with minimum damage. "They are studying us," Veltar told Zilway quietly, "learning how our bodies work." "You are seeing things that are not there," Zilway replied. But his voice was not as confident as before. The psychological attacks began during the 2nd week. The humans would leave small objects near the Kethmori camp, pieces of armor from missing patrols, weapons that had been taken apart and put back together in strange ways, pictures of Kethmori soldiers with their faces crossed out. One morning, they found a complete Kethmori meal laid out on a rock just outside the camp perimeter. The food was perfectly prepared according to their traditions, but it sat in the open air as if waiting for someone to claim it. "How do they know our food customs?" asked a confused cook. Veltar was beginning to understand. Somewhere in the wilderness, the humans were holding captured Kethmori. They were learning everything: language, culture, biology, psychology. Every missing patrol was a lesson for their enemy. The real horror began when Sergeant Kim Daeho made his presence known. The explosion came at dawn, when most of the camp was sleeping. Not the main fortress, that would have been too obvious. Instead, the humans had somehow undermined the camp's water supply. The underground pipes that brought fresh water from the nearby stream had been filled with some kind of expanding foam. When the pressure built up, the entire water system exploded, flooding half the camp and leaving the Kethmori without drinking water. "Impossible," said the chief engineer. "Those pipes are buried 3 meters underground. It would take days to reach them." "Unless you knew exactly where they were," Veltar said quietly. "Unless you had studied our construction methods." Commander Zekvar ordered teams to fix the water system. The repair crews worked for hours, digging through mud and debris. When they finally reached the broken pipes, they found something that made everyone step back in fear. The pipes had not been destroyed by the explosion. They had been carefully modified. Someone had spent days down in those tunnels, learning how the Kethmori water system worked, then turning it into a weapon. "Sergeant Kim Daeho sends his regards," was written on the pipe wall in perfect Kethmori script. That night, the humans attacked the food storage area, not with weapons or explosives, but with something much worse. They released local insects into the food supplies, insects that had been modified somehow. The creatures ate through metal containers and contaminated everything they touched. "How did they change the insects?" asked the science officer. "Study the local ecosystem," Veltar said. "Learn what lives here. Find ways to use it against us." The humans never showed themselves during these attacks. They struck from the shadows, using the planet itself as their weapon. Veltar began to realize that every day the humans spent in the wilderness made them stronger. They were learning to live here, to become part of this world. The worst attack came during the 3rd week. Lieutenant Park Minji announced herself by leaving a gift outside the medical tent. It was a perfectly prepared medical kit, containing treatments for injuries that the Kethmori medics had never seen before. The attached note, written in flawless Kethmori medical terminology, explained how to treat various wounds that humans might inflict. "This is a trap," said the chief medic. "These treatments could be poison." But 3 days later, when more injured Kethmori were brought in from failed patrols, the medics discovered that the human treatments worked perfectly. Better than their own medicine, in fact. "They know our biology better than we do," the chief medic admitted privately to Veltar. These treatments are designed specifically for our physiology. They must have studied captured soldiers for weeks. That was when Veltar understood the true horror of their situation. The humans were not just fighting them. They were improving them, making them stronger, healthier, more effective. But why? The answer came when he overheard two wounded soldiers talking in the medical tent. "The humans let me go," one of them whispered. "They had me for 5 days, but they let me go. Why?" I think they wanted me to come back. They wanted me to tell you all how strong they are, how much they know about us." Veltar felt his blood turn cold. The humans were not just studying individual Kethmori. They were studying the entire army's psychology. They were learning how fear spread through their ranks, how morale collapsed, how warriors turned against each other when hope was lost. Every escaped prisoner was carrying a message back to the main force. The message was simple. The humans were superior in every way. They knew everything about the Kethmori. Resistance was hopeless. "They are turning us into their own messengers," Veltar whispered to himself. On the final night in the camp, Major Choi Woojin introduced himself by orchestrating the grandest display yet. Every single piece of equipment in the camp stopped working at exactly the same time. Weapons, communications, vehicles, even simple cooking tools. Everything failed simultaneously. When the Kethmori technicians examined the equipment, they found that nothing had been damaged. Instead, every device had been subtly modified to fail at a predetermined time. Someone had spent weeks sneaking into the camp making tiny changes to thousands of pieces of equipment. "They have been inside our camp this entire time," Commander Zekvar said, his voice hollow with defeat. "Walking among us, learning from us. We never even knew they were here." The retreat to the orbital station began the next morning. As the Kethmori forces packed their remaining supplies, Veltar looked back at the wilderness where the humans still hid. Somewhere out there, Sergeant Kim Daeho was probably teaching other humans how to turn water systems into weapons. Lieutenant Park Minji was likely studying new ways to break alien psychology. Major Choi Woojin was planning even more elaborate traps, and Captain Lee Jinwoo was watching it all, learning everything he needed to know about how the Kethmori responded to defeat. Station Corval hung in space like a metal mountain. The massive orbital platform had been built by Kethmori engineers using their strongest designs. Triple-layered armor plating covered every surface. Energy shields surrounded the entire structure. Weapon platforms jutted out like spears ready to destroy any approaching enemy. "Finally," said Commander Zekvar as the transport ships docked, "a position we can defend properly." Veltar followed the other survivors through the station's corridors. The walls were thick enough to stop plasma cannons. The life support systems had multiple backups. The communication arrays could reach across star systems. This was Kethmori engineering at its finest. Less than half of the original ground force had made it to the station. Many had been lost in the wilderness, picked off one by the human hunters. Others had simply disappeared during the chaotic retreat. Veltar counted faces he knew. Zilway was there along with a few hundred other survivors, but so many were gone. "Set up defensive positions at every entrance," ordered Commander Zekvar. "Monitor all approach vectors. The humans cannot take this station by force." Veltar wanted to believe that. The station's weapons could destroy entire fleets. Its shields could absorb massive attacks. No boarding party could penetrate its defenses. But he remembered Captain Lee Jinwoo's calm eyes and felt worried. For the first week, nothing happened. The humans did not attack. They did not even approach the station. Long-range sensors showed no enemy ships within 50 light hours. It was as if the humans had simply given up. "See?" said Zilway. "They know they cannot touch us here. We have won." But Veltar noticed that the communication officers were working harder than usual. Messages flowed in and out of the station constantly. Reports from other Kethmori forces, requests for supplies, orders from the High Command. "Why so much communication traffic?" Veltar asked the chief communications officer. "The humans have been broadcasting surrender offers," the officer replied. "Different terms to different commanders. We must coordinate our responses carefully." That made Veltar suspicious. He requested access to the communication logs and began studying the message patterns. What he found made his scales crawl with fear. The humans were not broadcasting simple surrender offers. They were sending carefully crafted messages designed to create confusion and mistrust among the Kethmori forces. Some messages offered better terms to certain commanders than others. Some suggested that other Kethmori units were already negotiating secret deals. They are trying to make us suspicious of each other, Veltar reported to Commander Zekvar. Impossible, the commander replied. We are disciplined warriors. We will not fall for such simple tricks. But Veltar watched the command staff during the daily briefings. He saw how officers glanced at each other when certain messages were read. He heard whispered conversations in the corridors. The human's poison was already working. Private Han Suman made her presence known during the second week. The station's computer systems began experiencing strange glitches. Nothing serious at first, just small problems that slowed down operations. Food processors would stop working for a few minutes. Elevator systems would skip floors. Environmental controls would adjust temperatures slightly. Maintenance issues, reported the chief engineer. These systems are old. They need repairs. But Veltar noticed that the glitches followed patterns. They always happened at the worst possible times. When commanders were meeting, the lights would flicker. When patrol schedules were being planned, the computers would run slowly. When supply inventories were being checked, the databases would become temporarily unavailable. Someone is inside our computer systems, Veltar told his squad leader. Paranoid thinking, Brixton replied. You see enemies everywhere now. The psychological warfare escalated during the third week. The humans began broadcasting detailed information about Kethmori culture and history, information that only insiders should know. They talked about specific battles, mentioned individual warriors by name, even knew personal details about commanders' families. How do they know about my father's military service? Asked one young officer, his voice shaking. They have been studying us for months, Veltar said. Every captured soldier, every piece of equipment, every communication they intercept, it all teaches them more about us. But the worst part was not what the humans knew. It was how they used that knowledge. They would broadcast messages that sounded like they came from Kethmori High Command, giving contradictory orders to different units. They would send fake distress calls that sounded like they came from missing patrol ships. They would even broadcast what sounded like private conversations between commanders, revealing embarrassing secrets. Command authority is breaking down, Veltar observed to Zilway. No one knows which orders are real anymore. You worry too much, Zilway replied. But Veltar noticed that his friend's hands shook slightly when he spoke. Major Choi Woo-jin revealed the full scope of the human plan during the fourth week. Captain Lee Jinwoo appeared on the main communication screen, speaking directly to the station's crew. Greetings, Station Korval, the human captain said politely. I hope you are comfortable in your fortress. Commander Zekvar stepped forward angrily. What do you want, human? To thank you, Captain Lee Jinwoo replied. You have been most helpful in our research. Every day you spend in that station teaches us more about Kethmori technology and tactics. We have told you nothing. You have told us everything. The human captain smiled slightly. Every repair your engineers make shows us how your systems work. Every patrol route you establish reveals your security procedures. Every order you give demonstrates your command structure. Veltar felt his blood freeze. The humans had been watching them constantly, learning from their every action. You see, Captain Lee Jinwoo continued, we have been inside your station since the day you arrived. Your computer systems, your communication networks, your environmental controls, we have access to all of them. Impossible, Commander Zekvar snarled. Our security is perfect. Your security is Kethmori, the human replied. Designed to stop Kethmori threats. We are not Kethmori. That was when Veltar understood the full horror of their situation. The humans had not been trying to break into the station. They had been invited in. Every time the Kethmori had repaired their systems using salvaged human technology, they had opened new doors for their enemy. Every time they had studied captured human equipment, they had learned to think like humans. And humans thought differently than any species they had ever faced. The proof came immediately. All around the station, systems began failing in coordinated ways. Not random breakdowns, but carefully orchestrated shutdowns that left the Kethmori helpless without actually damaging the station. Life support remained stable, but weapon systems went offline. Communications stayed operational, but defensive shields collapsed. The lights remained on, but security doors locked randomly, trapping crew members in different sections of the station. They are not trying to destroy us, Veltar realized aloud. They are trying to capture us intact. Why? Asked Zilway. Because dead enemies teach them nothing. But prisoners can answer questions. Over the station's communication system, Captain Lee Jinwoo's voice remained calm and polite. You have been excellent subjects for our research. We have learned more about Kethmori military doctrine in these past weeks than in years of previous study. But now we need to move to the next phase of our investigation. What next phase? Commander Zekvar demanded. Personal interviews, the human captain replied. We have many questions about your culture, your technology, your strategic thinking. Questions that can only be answered through direct conversation. The station shuddered as docking clamps engaged. Somehow human ships had approached and connected to the station without anyone noticing. The internal sensors had been blinded, the defensive weapons disabled, the warning systems silenced. All Kethmori personnel will remain calm and cooperative, Captain Lee Jinwoo announced. Resistance will result in extended questioning. Through the corridor windows, Veltar could see human soldiers moving through the station. They wore no armor and carried simple weapons. They moved with the confidence of people walking through their own home. How long have they been watching us? Zilway whispered. Since the beginning, Veltar replied. Every moment, every conversation, every private thought we shared. They have been studying us like insects in a jar. The human soldiers reached their section of the station. When they opened the doors, Veltar was not surprised to see Captain Lee Jinwoo leading them personally. Thank you for your cooperation, the human captain said, as politely as if they were meeting at a diplomatic function. Your contribution to our understanding of Kethmori military capabilities has been invaluable. As they were led away, Veltar heard Major Choi Woojin speaking to one of the human soldiers. Phase 3 preparations are complete. All subjects secured for transport. Recommend beginning psychological profile analysis immediately. Phase 3. Veltar shuddered to think what that might involve. The human prison ship was nothing like what Veltar had expected. Instead of dark cells and torture chambers, the Kethmori prisoners found themselves in comfortable rooms with soft beds, adequate food, and even entertainment systems. Each room had a small window showing the stars outside. This is not right, whispered Zilway from the bed across from Veltar. Why are they treating us well? Veltar studied their room carefully. The walls looked normal, but he suspected hidden cameras and listening devices were everywhere. The humans were still watching, still learning. Because comfortable prisoners talk more than tortured ones, Veltar replied quietly. The daily routine was almost pleasant. 3 meals a day, exercise periods, even access to books and games. Human guards were polite and helpful. If a prisoner felt sick, medical care was provided immediately. If someone wanted to speak with a friend in another room, visits were arranged without question. But Veltar noticed the subtle details that others missed. The food was prepared exactly according to Kethmori preferences. Not close enough, but perfectly. The books were translated into their language with complete accuracy. The medical treatments showed a deep understanding of Kethmori biology. They know us too well, he told Commander Zekvar during one of their supervised meetings. What do you mean? The commander asked. The food tastes like home. The books are exactly the ones we would choose. The room temperature is set to what makes us most comfortable. They have studied every detail of how to keep us happy. And why is that bad? Because happy prisoners let their guard down. Happy prisoners start to trust their captors. Happy prisoners begin to forget they are prisoners at all. Veltar was right. Within days, some of the younger Kethmori soldiers were chatting freely with their human guards. They talked about their families, their homeworlds, their military training. The humans listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and showing respect for Kethmori culture. They seem to understand us, said one young soldier. Maybe they are not as evil as we thought. But Veltar noticed that the conversations always steered toward military topics. The humans would ask innocent questions about Kethmori weapons, tactics, and strategies. They showed curiosity about other alien species that Kethmori had fought. They seemed fascinated by stories of past battles and conquests. They are intelligence gathering, Veltar warned his fellow prisoners. Every word you say teaches them how to fight us better. Most of the prisoners ignored his warnings. After weeks of comfortable treatment, it was easy to forget that these polite humans were still their enemies. The real psychological warfare began during the second week. Lieutenant Park Minji introduced herself by visiting each prisoner personally. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She claimed to be a medical officer interested in making sure all prisoners stayed healthy. "How are you feeling, Veltar?" she asked during her first visit. "Any physical discomfort? Any emotional stress?" "I am fine," Veltar replied carefully. "Good. I want you to know that we have great respect for the Kethmori people. Your military traditions are impressive. Your loyalty to each other is admirable." She spoke as if they were friends having a casual conversation, but Veltar noticed how she watched his reactions to certain words. She was reading his body language, his facial expressions, his tone of voice. "We know this situation is difficult," Lieutenant Park Minji continued. "Being separated from your families, uncertain about your future. If you ever need someone to talk to, I am here to listen." After she left, Zilwei seemed troubled. "She was nice," he said. "Different from what I expected humans to be like." "That is exactly what she wants you to think," Veltar replied. The lieutenant's visits became regular. She would spend time with different prisoners, always offering comfort and understanding. She never asked direct questions about military secrets. Instead, she encouraged prisoners to talk about their feelings, their fears, their hopes for the future. But Veltar noticed patterns in her conversations. She would mention specific details about prisoners' backgrounds, details that could only have come from careful surveillance. She knew about soldiers' families, their personal relationships, their private concerns. "How does she know about my brother's illness?" asked one confused prisoner. "They have been studying our communications for months," Veltar explained. "Every message we sent home, every personal conversation they recorded, they know our entire lives." The psychological pressure increased when Private Han Suman began showing prisoners recordings of their own conversations. Not interrogations or forced confessions, but casual chats they had shared with human guards. "Listen to yourself," she would say, playing back a recording. "You sound relaxed, friendly. These humans are treating you with respect." The recordings were edited cleverly. They showed Kethmori prisoners speaking positively about their treatment, laughing with human guards, even expressing doubt about their previous military actions. "I never said those things," protested one prisoner after hearing his recording. "But you did," Private Han Suman replied gently. "Perhaps you do not remember the exact words, but the feelings were real. You are beginning to see humans as individuals, not monsters." The recordings were played to other prisoners, creating doubt and suspicion. If one soldier could speak positively about humans, could others be trusted? If guards could be friendly, were they really enemies? If treatment was good, why resist? "They are making us question everything we believed," Veltar told Commander Zekvar. But even the commander was changing. Veltar watched him during meals, during exercise periods, during conversations with other officers. The certainty was gone from his voice. The confidence was missing from his posture. "Maybe," the commander said quietly one day, "we were wrong about humans. Maybe they are not the monsters we thought. Sir, with respect, that is exactly what they want you to think. But look around, Veltar. Are we being tortured? Are we being killed? They treat us better than we treated their prisoners." That was when Veltar realized the full scope of the human plan. They were not trying to break their prisoners through pain or fear. They were breaking them through kindness and doubt. They were making the Kethmori question their own beliefs, their own culture, their own reasons for fighting. The final phase began when Captain Li Jinwu offered the prisoners a choice. "You have been with us for several weeks now," he announced during a general assembly. "You have seen how we treat our prisoners. You have learned about human culture and values. Now we offer you an opportunity." The captain's voice remained calm and reasonable, but Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. "You may return to your own forces if you wish. We will provide transportation back to Kethmori space. No conditions, no demands. You are free to leave." The prisoners looked at each other in confusion. This was not what anyone had expected. However, Captain Li Jinwu continued, "We also offer an alternative. You may choose to remain here and help us prevent future conflicts between our species. Share your knowledge of Kethmori culture to help us understand each other better. Work with us to build peace instead of war." "This is a trap," Veltar whispered to Zilwei. But his friend was staring at the human captain with growing interest. "Is it they are offering us a choice? Real freedom. Freedom to betray our own people. Or freedom to prevent more suffering?" The debate that followed split the prisoners into bitter factions. Some wanted to return home immediately. Others were tempted by the human offer. A few seemed genuinely convinced that cooperation was the right choice. Veltar watched in horror as lifelong friendships crumbled. Soldiers who had fought together for years now argued about loyalty and duty. Officers questioned their orders and their oaths. The unity that had held the Kethmori forces together was dissolving. "You see what they have done," Veltar said to Lieutenant Park Minji during one of her visits. "You have turned us against each other." "We have given you choices," she replied calmly. "What you do with those choices is up to you. You knew this would happen. You planned it. We studied your culture, yes. We learned how Kethmori society works, how your military hierarchy functions, how your soldiers think and feel, but the choices are still yours to make." The worst moment came when Zilway announced his decision. Veltar's closest friend, his battle companion for over 10 years, stood up during the evening meal and spoke to the assembled prisoners. "I am staying," Zilway said. "I am going to work with the humans to prevent future wars." The room erupted in angry shouts. Some prisoners called Zilway a traitor. Others supported his choice. But Veltar just sat in stunned silence, watching his best friend choose the enemy over his own people. Later that night, alone in their room, Veltar confronted Zilway. "How could you?" he asked. "How could you betray everything we fought for?" "I am not betraying anything," Zilway replied. "I am choosing peace over endless war. You are choosing the humans over your own species." "No. I am choosing understanding over ignorance." "These humans are not monsters, Veltar. They are people just like us. They have families, hopes, fears. They want to live in peace. They destroyed our fleet. They killed our friends. We invaded their space. We attacked their colonies. Who started this war?" Veltar stared at his friend, seeing a stranger. The humans had not tortured Zilway or threatened him. They had done something much worse. Veltar finished his testimony and sat back in the metal chair. The silence in the tribunal chamber was complete. The representatives from a dozen different alien species stared at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. "You claim," said the tribunal leader slowly, "that humans defeated a force of 50,000 Kethmori warriors using psychological warfare and intelligence gathering." "They did not just defeat us," Veltar replied. "They dissected us. They learned everything about how we think, how we fight, how we organize our society. Then they used that knowledge to turn us against ourselves." "But the Kethmori are renowned warriors," protested a representative from the Vortak Empire. "Your species has conquered 17 star systems. How could primitive humans overcome such experience?" Veltar looked at the Vortak representative with tired eyes. "That is exactly what we thought. We believed our experience made us strong. But the humans showed us that experience can become a weakness if your enemy studies it carefully enough." He stood and walked to the center of the chamber, addressing all the assembled aliens. "Do you want to know what happened after the Proxima campaign? When the surviving Kethmori returned home, we carried more than just defeat with us. We carried doubt, division, and detailed intelligence about human capabilities." The tribunal leader leaned forward. "Explain." "Within 6 months, the humans had used the psychological profiles they developed during our imprisonment to target 3 other Kethmori colonies. They did not send fleets or armies. They sent carefully crafted communications that exploited our cultural weaknesses." Veltar activated a holographic display showing Kethmori space. 3 colony worlds were marked in red. Kelvar Prime fell to internal rebellion after humans convinced the planetary governor that the military commander was planning a coup. Thexton Station surrendered without a shot being fired when humans proved they could disable the base's life support systems remotely. The Morden Defense Fleet disbanded itself after human agents convinced different ship commanders that their colleagues were planning to defect. "Impossible," breathed the Vortak representative. "Not impossible. Inevitable. The humans had studied us so thoroughly that they knew exactly which buttons to push. They understood our honor codes, our chain of command, our personal relationships. They turned our strengths into weapons against us." Veltar gestured to the holographic display, highlighting communication intercepts and intelligence reports. Every Kethmori who returned from human captivity became an unwitting intelligence asset. We carried information about human methods back to our people. We shared stories about human kindness and reasonableness. We planted seeds of doubt about whether fighting humans was worth the cost. "Are you saying the humans deliberately released prisoners to spread their influence?" asked a representative from the Crystal Consortium. I am saying the humans think differently than any species we have encountered. They do not just fight wars to win territory or resources. They fight wars to gather intelligence about their enemies. Every battle teaches them something new. Every victory makes them more dangerous. Veltar paused, remembering the faces of his former comrades who had chosen to stay with the humans. Zilway, my closest friend, now works as a cultural advisor for the Human Diplomatic Corps. He helps them understand other alien species. He believes he is promoting peace, but he is really helping humans prepare for future conflicts. What about the others who stayed? Asked the tribunal leader. They have become teachers, researchers, consultants. They study their own species and report their findings to human intelligence services. They do this willingly, believing they are preventing wars. In reality, they are providing humans with detailed information about alien military capabilities and psychological profiles. The chamber erupted in worried murmurs. Representatives whispered urgently to their advisors. The implications of Veltar's testimony were beginning to sink in. How many species have the humans studied in this manner? Asked a nervous voice from the back of the chamber. That is what terrifies me, Veltar replied. I do not know, but I suspect they have been gathering intelligence about every alien species they have encountered. They may know more about our civilizations than we know about ourselves. The tribunal leader called for order. What do you recommend we do with this information? Veltar looked around the chamber, seeing fear and uncertainty in every face. These were representatives of some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, but they all looked like frightened children. You have two choices, he said simply. You can try to coexist peacefully with humanity, or you can fight them and discover exactly why the human warfront was hell. What if we choose to fight? Asked the Vortak representative. Then you will lose. Not because humans have superior weapons or larger fleets, but because they will study you while you fight them. They will learn your weaknesses, exploit your cultural blind spots, and turn your own people against you. They will make you defeat yourselves, and if we choose peace, then you have a chance. But you must understand what that means. Peace with humans is not the same as peace with other species. Humans will still study you. They will still gather intelligence. They will still prepare for the possibility of future conflict. The difference is that they will not actively work to destroy you. Veltar returned to his chair, feeling suddenly very old and tired. I am not here to tell you what to choose. I am here to tell you what humans are capable of when they decide you are their enemy. I survived the Proxima campaign not because I was strong or clever, but because the humans wanted me to survive. They wanted me to return home and tell this story. Why? Asked the tribunal leader. Because they knew that someday I would end up here in this chamber, speaking to representatives of other alien civilizations. They knew that my testimony would accomplish more than a dozen military victories. They would make every species in the galaxy afraid of fighting humans. The silence that followed was profound. Veltar could see the fear spreading through the chamber like a disease. The humans had won another victory without firing a shot. There is something else, Veltar said quietly. Something I discovered after returning home. What? Captain Lee Jinwoo has been promoted to Admiral. He now leads the Human Strategic Intelligence Division. Sergeant Kim Daeho runs a training program that teaches human soldiers how to use alien environments as weapons. Lieutenant Park Minji heads the Psychological Warfare Research Institute. Major Choi Woo-jin coordinates intelligence gathering operations across human space. Veltar stood and walked toward the chamber's exit. They are not just military officers anymore. They are teachers sharing their knowledge with other humans. Every technique they used against us is now part of human military doctrine. Every lesson they learned is being applied to prepare for future conflicts. As he reached the door, Veltar turned back to address the chamber one final time. When I left this building today, I passed a group of humans in the lobby. They were part of a diplomatic delegation arriving for tomorrow's session. Among them was Admiral Lee Jinwoo. The chamber erupted in alarmed voices. Several representatives stood up shouting questions and demands. He gave me a respectful nod. Veltar continued over the noise, a gesture of acknowledgement between former enemies. But it was not the nod of a conqueror to the conquered. It was the nod of a scientist to a useful laboratory specimen. Veltar opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The humans are already here, studying you, learning about your cultures and your fears. My testimony today will not change that. It will only help them understand how different species react to information about human capabilities. The door closed behind him, leaving the tribunal chamber in chaos. Representatives argued, shouted, and demanded immediate action. But Veltar knew it was already too late. The humans had been planning this moment from the beginning. His testimony, his warnings, his revelations about human methods, all of it was part of their strategy. They had turned him into their messenger, spreading fear and uncertainty throughout the galaxy. As he walked through the corridors of the tribunal building, Veltar reflected on the true horror of what he had experienced. The humans had not just defeated the Kethmori military, they had transformed a proud warrior into a prophet of their power. In the lobby, he passed the human diplomatic delegation. Admiral Li Jinwu was there, just as Veltar had said. The human looked older now, with gray hair and tired eyes, but his gaze was still sharp and calculating. Their eyes met for a moment. The admiral nodded slightly, the same respectful gesture Veltar had described to the tribunal. But now Veltar understood what the nod really meant. It meant, "Thank you for your service." The humans had won again, and Veltar had helped them do it.